from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. Tonight, day 2 of the shutdown without a deal in sight.
Call your senators, your Democrat senators, the 44 people who want to shut the government down. You should call them right now and tell them to get here and get to work and open the country up for the people.
The developments throughout the day here in Washington as we hear a lot of talk from both sides of the political divide without much, if any, hint of a plan to get out of this shutdown.
Meanwhile, the president meets with his budget chief as potential permanent job cuts could be on the line. The White House threatening to announce layoffs in the coming days. We'll discuss it all with Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins and Congresswoman Madeleine Dean up ahead.
Plus, new reporting on the potential deal the Trump administration could strike with Ukraine as it contemplates sending long-range missiles to the embattled country to aid in its fight with Russia. We'll get into it with former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta.
And OpenAI vaults past Elon Musk's SpaceX to become the world's largest startup. Details on the company's massive valuation as it looks to partner up with Microsoft coming up in tonight's Power Brief.
We begin this evening, though, with the government shutdown now entering its second day and a White House eyeing the potential permanent firing of thousands of federal workers. As the president meets with his budget director, Russ Vought, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt telling reporters this earlier today.
It's likely going to be in the thousands. It's a very good question, and that's something that the Office of Management and Budget and the entire team at the White House here, again, is unfortunately having to work on today. These discussions and these conversations, these meetings would not be happening if the Democrats had voted to keep the government open.
We've got Bloomberg's Megan Scully covering Congress, Skylar Woodhouse at the White House right now, and we begin with Skylar and all the action today at the White House. Skylar, what can you tell us?
Absolutely. It's, everyone's trying to figure out how long this shutdown is going to last and what we can expect. What we do know is that House Speaker Mike Johnson was here at the White House today meeting with President Trump. We know that this meeting was separate from the meeting that President Trump had with Director Vought. So we're still trying to parse out those details from the meeting with Director Vought. But Mike Johnson was here at the White House today. So obviously discussions are, fully happening, and everyone is just all eyes on what could be next. And obviously what we're seeing right now from the White House is just sort of their approach to this shutdown, which is kind of a different kind of shutdown from what we traditionally see as they look to advance their agenda and sort of treat this as a Doge Part 2 as they sort of continue to shrink that size of the government.
All right, Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse reporting live for us tonight at the White House. Thank you so much. And House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries spoke to the press within the last hour and had this to say about the status of negotiations with President Trump and congressional Republicans.
Leader Schumer and myself haven't gotten a single phone call as it relates to a follow-up conversation. We're ready to have that conversation, but we need credible partners on the other side of the aisle.
Now, with more on the status of those shutdown talks and whether or not they're really happening on Capitol Hill is Bloomberg's Megan Scully. She leads our Capitol Influence team here at Bloomberg News. So, Megan, you just heard from the Democratic leader Jeffries there. Are there any negotiations happening? Because lawmakers have been telling Joe and I that at least behind the scenes there's some sort of talks, but has it amounted to anything?
So there are some lower level talks within the Senate because this is obviously very much eyes are all on the Senate and flipping about 5 Democratic votes, or if you're Chuck Schumer, keeping those 5 Democratic votes in line so they can't get the 60 votes they need to pass this Republican spending bill. There are talks being done. The Senate has a long history of loving gangs, as they call them, bipartisan groups, trying to strike a deal over these Affordable Care Act subsidies. That is really the crux of the Democratic demands. They expire on January 1st, and Democrats want to ensure that they stay active, that voters can continue to reap the benefits of these and that premiums don't go up.
Megan, it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
Of course, Bloomberg's Megan Scully on Balance of Power, and one of the agencies that could be impacted by those potential layoffs that we've been discussing. And the longer this goes, the greater the potential is the VA. Chat about 467,000 employees nationwide as of June, helping more than 16 million veterans across the country. Joining us now with more on the impact around the nation, Secretary of Veterans Affairs Doug Collins. Mr. Secretary, it's great to have you on Bloomberg TV and radio. We don't talk a lot about the VA, but if you're in Washington or if you're a veteran, you know that your job is one of the most difficult of the agencies here in Washington to bring care to millions of veterans around the country. To what extent is this shutdown going to make your job even more difficult?
Well, one, I think I have the best job in the cabinet. I'll argue with anyone. I get to take care of the best people in the world, and that is our veterans. And right now, look, I'm glad you brought this up, because right now there's no impact to our medical centers. There's no impact to our outpatient clinics, no impact to our vet centers. Benefits are going to still be processed. We're still doing, application stuff. So the most part, 97% of our workforce due to advanced appropriations is continuing. Now, we do have limits in stuff on like outreach to new veterans, outreaches to those that need help. We've had to close our regional offices. In our benefits offices, there's no walk-ins at this point. They can still use the online or call centers. But those are going to build. And frankly, if it continues on longer, there will be more impact, mainly on the outreach and how we process in the public.
Understood. Reportedly, your department will furlough less than 5% of staff, and considering the numbers that we're talking about, I guess that's fairly significant. Beyond impact, do you believe that they will all have their jobs to come back to? Have you talked to Russ Vought about this?
Yeah, there's no reason to not think so. Well, look, we've had a great year this year of looking at our population of our employees and making a commitment to saying we're going to take care of veterans and looking at our size. We had throughout the year, we've had our deferred resignation program, which is our early retirement program, which was used by a lot of our employees. We've downsized about 30,000 people. We're about 450,000 employees now. And the great part about that is that we were able to use that not only with these great workers that we had, and we wish them well as they leave, but what it's able to do is make us more focused in what we do. And in doing so, we've been able to lower our backlog from 264,000 when I first got there to almost 132,000 now. Our wait times at our hospitals are getting better and better as we make sure that we're getting better answers and quicker answers to our folks so that no veteran is impacted. So at this point in time, we're looking forward to frankly, we're hoping 5 Democrats will figure out that they need to keep the government open and that we can move forward and look forward to continue taking care of veterans.
Mr. Secretary, I'm wondering if you're hearing from any concerned veterans about either the future of their job security, their access to services, the longer this shutdown goes on.
No, there's just general concern. I mean, when you have issues like this, I was on the Hill for 8 years. There's always the concern of what may or may not be. That's why I'm here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on and share the positive news to our veterans, especially for those who get 9 million plus who get their health care through us, that they're not going to see any difference in what they have seen. Our vet centers are still open. The counseling is going on. Our mental health outreach and placement are still going on. So this is a good time for that. And I think really is to look through this is we're going to do what we have to do to take care of our veterans, and we have the funding to do that.
Since you did bring up health care, I did want to follow up on the negotiations that we are hearing related to some of those health care subsidies on Capitol Hill. The Urban Institute estimates 5.4 of all U.S. veterans are enrolled under the ACA's credit subsidized plans. What's your advice to veterans? Where are you coming down on this issue when we are talking about the future of health care being potentially tied to reopening the government?
Well, I think it's interesting right now is my advice to veterans, call your senators and get them to open the government, and then they do the negotiations that they need to do on how they're going to handle that situation. This is as someone who was in Congress, a legislator, you deal with legislative policies in places where you can have your discussions and decide what is best going forward, and both parties getting their say. Holding it hostage at the end for this on a really what is an unreasonable discussion in which you're not even bringing a reasonable proponent to the table to start with is frustrating. So I would just tell veterans, look, get the government open and hold Congress accountable for passing the bills that needs to fund the government.
Getting the government open would also be required to address legislation that is on the table that would allow Department of Veterans Affairs doctors to talk with their patients about medical marijuana. Secretary, there's a big debate right now about potentially rescheduling. The president has spoken to this in Washington, D.C. Is that something that you support, that we should be talking about and considering?
I think we're discussing a lot of different things, especially to help our veterans. I'm the first secretary who's actually said that use of psychedelics is something that we already study. We have approximately 42 studies, clinical trials that are going on right now using various medications to make sure that we're finding the best way for some of our veterans who have chronic PTS, traumatic brain injury, concussion injury. We're willing to look at those and make sure that it's proper for us to use. We're of course, following the law, doing what we're supposed to do. I think it's an interesting discussion for Congress to have. We'll continue to follow the law. We're going to give good clinical data to show what helps veterans. And then in the end, I think it could also show, could this help the general population as a whole?
But just for clarity, Mr. Secretary, where do you fall specifically when it does come to cannabis being used in this way to potentially treat those suffering from PTSD?
Well, and it's really irrelevant how I feel about it. If it works for veterans, then I'm going to be happy for us to use it in the VA. But until the Congress decides how they're going to use that, it's really not a discussion point for me. I think if it works, we're going to be able to use it. Congress needs to look at the evidence and say, this is what we want to move forward on. I think it is something definitely that they need to positively look toward. We've seen some advances in it, but it is a congressional decision, and we'll abide by that until they decide.
Understood, Secretary. Another story we talk about a lot and a lot more around here is artificial intelligence. And as we were preparing for our conversation with you, we saw your department has several pages of documents devoted to the integration of AI in VA systems. And I'm fascinated to hear from you more about what you're working on here and whether this shutdown might hasten the adoption of AI to help make the agency more efficient.
I think we're already on our way there. And I think, look, I want to assure our veterans, and this is one of the things, and it's always sensitive when you deal with healthcare and others, and I appreciate your thought of, yes, this is a very difficult agency. We're very large, and we take care of 9 million veterans. But AI is a very good tool for us to be able to use. It's being used in healthcare systems all across the country. We're unique in that we get to, especially in that we get to take care of veterans, but we're not unique in the healthcare space. AI is being used in radiology, other parts of treatment and diagnosis. We're going to continue to look at that. We're looking at ambient monitoring where our doctors can actually have more transcribed issues. And we've not ever done this. Most hospitals have already gone to this where they can do their records so the doctor's not worried about missing something. They can hear it, and as they go back on their records, we're looking toward using that in our hospital system, but also we're using it in our disability claims and looking at how we can expand that out, always with a human sort of oversight to make sure that it's going and done properly. But that's the way that we can look at maybe and for veterans out there, they'll understand what I'm talking about, the C&P exams, where they're actually having to go get a doctor to say, yes, this is something you have a disability and this is something that you're affected by your service. Many of those times, those are already in the record themselves. And wow, if we could go through that with technology and save us $3 or $4 billion over time, to actually put that toward healthcare, prosthetics, and other things and benefits, that would be a great savings, not only to the American people, but a great help to our veterans.
All right, an important conversation. Veterans Affairs Secretary Doug Collins, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg.
Thanks.
And coming up, the future of thousands of federal workers is unclear as President Trump works with the director of the Office of Management and Budget. Someone who's held that position in the past is former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. He joins us up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We're going to look at agencies that don't align with the administration's values that we feel are a waste of the taxpayer dollar. And look, unfortunately, these conversations are happening because we don't have any money coming into the federal government right now. And so the president wants to be a good steward of the American taxpayer dollar during a time when our balance sheet is looking very grim because the Democrats chose to shut the government down.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Tyler Kendall in Washington. Thanks for being with us. That was White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt from earlier today discussing the targeting of, quote, Democratic agencies when it comes to potential layoffs. Following Budget Director Russ Vought's meeting with the president amid the shutdown. Joining us for more is former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta. You should know as well, he has a card for every story and was in fact the director of Office of Management and Budget during the Clinton administration. So Director, Secretary, Mr. Chief of Staff, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. You know what it's like to be on both sides of this. You are also a member of Congress. You've also, as we just mentioned, run agencies that were subject to budget decisions during shutdowns. How do you see what's happening here with the president and his budget director threatening mass layoffs? Do they have no other choice?
You know, there's one thing we've learned time and time again is there's nothing good comes out of a shutdown of the federal government. And very frankly, it's the responsibility of elected leaders to govern, not to allow for a shutdown of the federal government, which does nothing else but hurt people. It hurts innocent people, innocent taxpayers who frankly are, I think, frustrated and angry about the situation in Washington. So there's just nothing good that's going to come of this. Whatever the president does is not going to be good. Whatever happens with the Congress basically failing to come together and try to pass a continuing resolution, it's just not going to benefit our country, our economy, and it's certainly not going to benefit our trust in elected leadership.
We just spoke with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Secretary Collins told us that his department is essentially not affected by this, despite the millions of veterans who receive services. He also said Democrats are to blame. So which one should we focus on?
Well, you know, look, there's plenty of blame to go around. Neither party is going to benefit from this. The American people are basically blaming both parties for this shutdown. And so the longer it goes on, the more blame both parties are going to continue to bear. I think the most important thing right now is for the parties to recognize that they've got to begin negotiation. They've got to start having a dialogue in which they're talking with one another in order to determine whether or not they can arrive at a compromise or a consensus that can then restore funding for the federal government. That's the way Washington's supposed to work, and that's what they ought to be doing now, rather than simply locking in their different trenches and throwing grenades at one another, which is benefiting no one.
When we are thinking about this perhaps heightened pressure related to the potential for permanent firings, Mr. Secretary, I'm wondering if you could just put into context here the line perhaps OMB walks when it comes to executive authority, because our understanding is there's going to be legal fights as a result of some of the actions the administration could take during a shutdown. While we've heard from this White House that they feel firmly rooted in the legal authority that they do have to take these actions.
Well, you know, look, I was director of OMB when we were successful at being able to pass large deficit reduction packages. And as a result of the packages we passed, we essentially balanced the federal budget. And we passed all of the appropriations bills by the deadline of October 1. There was no need for a CR because we met the deadline. That's the way you're supposed to operate. That's what you're supposed to do. We passed budget resolutions. We passed appropriations bill. We were able to govern. People don't elect people in Washington to simply go back to Washington and fight each other and not govern. So, you know, ultimately what has to happen here is elected leaders have to recognize that they have to govern. They're going to have to make some tough choices. We have a huge debt in this country. Trillions of dollars of debt. Neither party wants to deal with that debt. And the result is that we have this situation now where both parties are blaming each other for the failure to govern, when in fact both parties are to blame for the failure to govern. And so that's what they've got to stand up and do the right thing. Otherwise, very frankly, who's going to bear the largest price? Our economy is going to bear the largest price for this shutdown. And that's going to hurt a lot of people.
Well, that's coming from a senior Democrat. Mr. Secretary, we heard from the President of the United States, in this case in his capacity as Commander-in-Chief, talking to top brass at Quantico. I bet you saw the speech or you heard about it earlier this week. This is the backdrop to the shutdown, knowing that troops at the moment are not going to be paid unless there's a carve out of some sort from the big, beautiful bill that has yet to be codified. I just want you to go back to what the president told this room of experienced generals and officers at Quantico. Let's listen.
We've brought back the fundamental principle that defending the homeland is the military's first and most important priority. That's what it is. Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms.
All right. There's a lot there, Mr. Secretary, and the idea of helping to train our troops by deploying them into inner cities got a lot of attention. Is this the right time to ask them for such dedication when we're not sure we can pay them in the next installment?
Well, look, first of all, our military's primary role is to defend this country from our enemies abroad, from foreign enemies. That's what the military is for. And the military has to be trained on warfare, not on law enforcement, but on warfare. And today, very frankly, if you want to learn lessons of war, look at Ukraine. Our troops have to be trained on drones. They've got to be trained on air defenses. They've got to be trained on missiles. They've got to be trained on combat. That's not going to happen in the cities. That's going to happen on deployments abroad. It's going to happen on exercises. It's going to happen in military posts where they're trained in order to be a good military. That's what we need to focus on. The military has a specific role to defend this country from foreign enemies. And if you're worried about dealing with problems in the cities, that very frankly is the responsibility of local law enforcement. It's the responsibility of the police. It's the responsibility of the FBI. That's the way it should operate. It is not the role of the military to basically play law enforcement in our cities.
Mr. Secretary, in the final minute that I have with you, we did hear from the Ukrainian President Zelensky earlier today saying that he's confident that he will be able to secure long-range weapons from the U.S. Can you just talk to us about what sort of tactical advantage this could give Ukraine? How significant a development should we be factoring in here?
Well, that's frankly the best news that I've heard. And I know the Wall Street Journal reported this, that the United States is considering providing intelligence to Ukraine on targets in Russia, and also providing Tomahawks and Barracudas and other long-range missiles that can go 500 miles or more to be able to hit those targets in Russia. So I think it would be the right thing to do because why? Because it would put pressure on Putin. That's the only thing he understands is pressure. And if we were able to do that, I think it would be a significant step towards putting more pressure on Putin and, frankly, ultimately bringing him to the negotiating table in order to resolve this conflict. So I view that as essential to our policy in Ukraine.
Former Defense Secretary, CIA Director Leon Panetta, it's great to see you. We won't forget the OMB card as well. Thank you, as always.
This is Bounce Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio alongside Joe Matthew. I'm Tyler Kendall, and the shutdown is grinding much of Washington to a halt as the two parties remain at a standoff. Here's House Speaker Mike Johnson from earlier today.
Don't ask the Republicans what we should be doing or what we should be negotiating. I don't have anything to negotiate. I sent them in good faith exactly what they had voted for before. We did not put any Republican provisions in that, and we tried to make this very simple, in good faith, so the appropriations process of the people can continue.
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. She's a member of the Appropriations and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining. Can you just give us the latest, the inside view? Where do negotiations stand right now, if they're happening at all?
Well, good evening to you, Tyler. Good to be with you. I hope negotiations are going on. I know there's work to be done in the Senate. Today is a Jewish holiday, so many people were observing that. But I do know that Senate leadership has been discussing things. I know that my leadership has been discussing things. And to be very, very clear, Democrats in the House were here all week. I just left D.C. and got home today. We were there. We were ready to try to solve this problem, to be ready if the meeting with the president had any fruit to it. And we could have passed a budget for the American people so that people wouldn't be hurt. But unfortunately, the Speaker of the House, and I had a personal conversation with him about this, sent his members home 2 weeks ago, knowing that September 30th, 48 hours ago, was our deadline. So they effectively shut the government down. What a shame. And it's hurting my constituents.
Well, I am wondering how unified the Democratic Party is at this moment, because we have been hearing that there is unity within the party, but we did see 3 of your Democratic colleagues on the Senate side end up voting with the Republican bill. Is there unity when it comes to Democrats between the chambers?
You know what? I'm really impressed with the unity in our chamber. Obviously, I'm not over on the Senate side, but I'm very impressed with what Schumer is doing to hold people together and hold us together. I was here in 2019. I was sworn in, elected in 18, sworn in January of 19, in the longest government shutdown in our history. Of course, that was under Mr. Trump in his first administration. That created $11 billion worth of harm to the U.S. economy. And I'll tell you, it created incredible personal economic harm, as well as anxiety, a loss of our sense of well-being. Having people like air traffic controllers, Capitol Police, who actually are guarding our speaker, our leadership right now, going without pay. Imagine that. Our armed forces going without pay. So this is inexcusable. We should not be doing continuing resolutions, stopgap after stopgap, for more than a year. This is no way to run a business. It's no way to run a government. Democrats were here. Republicans have the House, the Senate, the White House, not to mention the backdrop of the Supreme Court. They're failing to govern, and it is hurting our constituents. They are at risk of losing their health care. This is a health care crisis in disguise. The Republicans, the president, have been wanting to undo the ACA because the president can't stand any success that Mr. Obama had on behalf of the American people, any success that Mr. Biden had on behalf of the American people. And so this is a secret way to try to take away health care from 70% of folks who get it on the exchange. My constituents are hurting, are worried, are anxious. This is inexcusable, and it is hurting the economy of everyday Americans, working Americans, to the benefit, of course, of what is their focus, which is a tax break for the very wealthy and blowing up our deficit.
You mentioned troops going out without pay, Congresswoman. Would you support this idea of tapping the extra monies for the Pentagon in the president's big, beautiful bill if this continues to roll without paychecks going out?
Hi, Joe. I just find it inexcusable. How in God's name, in this precarious time in this country, would we have Capitol Police or military going without pay? Of course, there are places on the books that we could do things. I'm newly an appropriator. I fought to become a member of the Appropriations Committee, and yet we have not been able to appropriate. If you watched any of the committee hearings, you know this very well because of your focus. We have 12 bills that make up our budget. We were not able to be actual appropriators. The president didn't offer top-line numbers. Many of his secretaries came in not knowing what their budget proposal was. And so this is no way to run a government, pulling money from here to there. I want our veterans fully supported, our military fully supported. I think you had on Secretary Collins. Do you know that his ambition is to cut 80,000 workers out of the Veterans Administration? That will hurt my veterans in the 4th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. This is an administration that has no respect for civil servants, for people who have worked for this country, not in a political way, but in a sincere way, try to serve our veterans, try to be members of ATF to help solve crimes, FBI to keep us safe from terror and terrorism here at home. And look what this administration is doing. It's a failure, and I'm asking the Speaker, bring your members back. Make sure that health care is protected. Americans' health care is protected. You were hell-bent on getting the permanent tax cuts for the very, very wealthy to blow up our deficit $5 trillion. That hurts my grandchildren and children. Yeah. Why don't you say we must make sure we continue that people can afford to buy insurance on the exchanges? Their premiums, they're getting notices now. Their premiums are going to increase. They could double, they could triple, they could just be priced out of the market, which, by the way, if you don't care about that, it's going to make it more expensive for you and me.
You mentioned your conversation with Speaker Johnson. It's made you a bit of a household name this week, Congresswoman. And if our listeners and viewers didn't see this video, you said to him in what appeared to be a kind of a sideline conversation that was caught on a reporter's camera. You said, the president is unhinged. He is unwell. What are you doing? Speaker Johnson said, a lot of folks on your side are too. I don't know what else you discussed or how much time you spent together, Congresswoman, but at any time did the Speaker of the House suggest to you that the president is not unhinged?
No, sadly. And I have to tell you, I have had conversation after conversation with the Speaker. So I am very respectful of him. You're absolutely right. It was a pull aside before I was to get on to another interview. I saw that he was there, and I wanted him to see that we are gravely concerned. I want this president to be successful. I wanted him to be successful the first time around. But you saw what he did in front of the UN General Assembly, and then what he did in front of 800 generals, admirals, top military brass, so foolishly called in to hear a lecture and insults from Secretary of Defense Hegseth. And then the set of things that the president said that made no sense. So the Speaker had a genuine conversation with me. I also implored him to tell the truth to the American people about this shutdown and about the CR, that it's not some clean CR. Mm-hmm. But most importantly, and most genuinely and sincerely, I wanted to say, when you see the president tweeting things after a conversation in the Oval Office where you are putting a sombrero on the leader of the House and a mustache and playing Mexican music, I said to him, don't you see that's racist? He said, is it? I don't know if it's racist. But to your question, he did not push back. The president is unwell. It's very concerning. It's extraordinarily dangerous. And as a member of Foreign Affairs and Appropriations, we're seeing the outcome.
I appreciate you being with us. Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, we thank you for the time. While the government has been shut down, Wall Street has been keeping busy. Today, traders were processing new sales numbers from Tesla. Stephanie Valdez-Streety, Director of Industry Insights for Cox Automotive, earlier today on Bloomberg Tech.
I think a lot of consumers that were considering buying a vehicle, EV specifically, pulled ahead, bought it in Q3 because of the incentives. And so I think just we're going to see that slowdown coming Q4, and we'll start to see the market stabilize. What's that natural demand for EVs? And I think it's going to be dependent on, for Tesla, right, once again, having some product, new product that's going to resonate with consumers. And then I think the other challenge for Tesla is navigating the changes in regulatory policy.
Consumers appearing to race to purchase EVs before federal tax credits expired Tuesday. Other car manufacturers like GM, Ford, Hyundai also reporting a rush in late demand. With more on that story and others, we turn to Power Moves with Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick at World Headquarters in New York. Romaine?
Yeah, and it raises a lot of questions, Joe, about what those numbers are going to look like for the months and quarters up ahead if there was indeed a pull forward. Tesla was the biggest drag on the S&P 500 today as a lot of investors looked past the bump up that we saw in their numbers for the period that just closed up 7% or more over a year-over-year period. But when you look forward, the big question is, what will people continue to buy. We should point out, despite the drag from Tesla today, we did still continue to see a record high for the broader indices. And a big part of the reason was because of that continued relentless melt-up that we see in chip stocks. The AI trade in full swing. More evidence coming out of OpenAI, coming out of AMD, coming out of Intel that CapEx spend, the amount of money that companies are spending in this AI race, that still is firm and, more importantly, is still growing. I do just real quickly, Joe, want to touch on the government shutdown. It is not affecting the equity markets, but it is having an impact on the bond markets, not necessarily on a pricing level, but on volume. Volume in the bond market was very subdued today. Remember, volume typically spikes when you get economic data points that bond traders can trade around. Of course, we did not get the weekly jobless claims today. And at least as of right now, Joe, unless you know something I don't, we're not going to get those monthly jobs numbers tomorrow morning.
If you don't know it, I don't. Romaine Bostic at World Headquarters in New York. Thank you, as always, Romaine. Coming up, a new king of the startups. Details on how OpenAI amassed $500 billion value. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. Thanks for being with us. More on the ongoing budget negotiations happening on Capitol Hill in just a moment as we assemble our political panel next. First, the stories we're watching in today's Power Brief. 2 people were killed and 4 injured in a terror attack at a synagogue in Manchester earlier today. A man drove a car at worshipers gathering for Yom Kippur and then attacked with a knife before being shot by officers. The main suspect died on the scene. 2 others have since been arrested in connection with the attack.
And OpenAI has completed a deal to help employees sell $6.6 billion of stock at a $500 billion valuation. That propels the ChatGPT owner past Elon Musk's SpaceX to become the world's most valuable startup. The milestone comes at a pivotal time for the company as it talks with Microsoft to convert into a more traditional for-profit company. The company's latest offering, an AI video generator app called Sora, is already at the top of Apple's App Store, despite being invite-only in the U.S. and Canada.
A growing block of New York City Republicans say Andrew Cuomo should make an appeal for their vote in this November's mayoral election. With the New York City Young Republicans telling Bloomberg News Cuomo should make the appeal. The group representing a small minority of voters in the heavily Democratic city, but it's a potential opportunity for Cuomo in a split race that has now narrowed to Republican Curtis Sliwa and Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. Today, on the early edition of Balance of Power, we heard voices from both sides of the aisle, including Republican Congressman Brian Stile and Democratic Congressman Joe Morelli. Here's what they had to say about where things are headed in this shutdown.
What we should do is cooler heads hopefully do prevail as many folks are home on the Jewish holiday today or over the weekend. And we come back and we see the Senate have the courage to reopen the government, allowing us that period of time to finish negotiations on fiscal year 26 appropriations, as well as other policy priorities.
The administration seems to do whatever it wants without regard to what Congress says. So Congress has the power of the purse. We talk about it all the time. Article 1 of the Constitution gives that authority to the Congress. But even when Congress appropriates with the president money in accordance with the law, the president has impounded money. He's done pocket rescissions. How do we guarantee that the president doesn't renege on the things we all agree to? He is notoriously bad at upholding his end of the deal whenever he reaches a bargain. And that's a real problem, not just for now, but that's a real problem going forward.
Joining us now with their reaction to this story and more. This evening's political panel, Bloomberg Politics contributor and Democratic strategist Adam Hodge is with us. He's managing director at Bully Pulpit International alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, the president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. We've got a great panel here. Thank you both for being with us as we try to explore both sides of this. I will note first off, Sarah Chamberlain's crystal ball is still working. I think you remain undefeated. So here we are closed, as you said it would happen. I'm sorry that this is the reality. But when you hear these two gentlemen speak, both sound rational. This seems like it's a real game of trust right now.
I think it is. Obviously, Brian's a member of Main Street, so
Sure.
I agree with Brian.
I bet you do.
But there isn't trust between the two entities and both sides, and it's a tough time. And as I said a little bit earlier when we were talking off camera, there is a bill that one of our members introduced, Jen Kiggins from Virginia, that fixes this ACA problem. So how we got into this situation is really beyond me, and it's very unfortunate. I actually think we're here because of the far left, and nobody's really talking about that. If you
We've been
remember,
hearing about that a lot from Republicans.
if you remember, I was sitting here back in March when I said Chuck Schumer has to keep the government open. And the gentleman, who was not you, said, no, he has to close it. If you remember that. And I'm like, he can't. We walked out of here. Chuck Schumer did the right thing, kept the government open. He got criticized. He almost lost his job. Fast forward, this is where we are. I think AOC, he's afraid of AOC primarying him, and they're afraid of their far left flank. That's why we're in government shutdown right now. It's very unfortunate.
I mean, no surprise. I disagree with that just a slightly bit, Sarah. I think, but what Congressman Morell was saying right there, I think speaks to what has changed since March. There was no trust that the president is going to follow through, and that the Republicans will also follow through with a real negotiation on health care, unless that we can get it done now. They've poisoned the well so toxically. And you hear the president today saying, well, we're going to, shut down Democrat agencies, as if he's only elected to be president of the Trump states, not president of the United States. He has a job. He shut down the government because he doesn't want to strike a deal. He needs 60 votes to get something done. And the Democrats are saying, we don't trust you to get a deal on health care outside of this, so let's do it now. And the second reason is that the premiums go up if there's no deal now. Right? That will happen regardless of without a deal happening now. So I think that is why Democrats are pushing to get this done ASAP.
Okay, so then, Adam, what does the deal actually look like? What will Democrats really get on board with? Does there have to be this forcing mechanism that a vote's going to come down the line once the government reopens, or do we have to actually see the firm details before we can even get to that step?
I mean, I think it is part of passing and keeping the government open is legislation that also extends the ACA.
Linked to it
I
directly.
think that's what I hear from talking to folks on the Hill. They do not trust a sort of sidebar package and we'll get a vote later, because Trump has shown no willingness, no ability to follow through with his other commitments to funding agencies or running the government the way he's supposed to.
I think you've implied that that's a non-starter for Republican leaders. You got to reopen the government to enter negotiations. So we've been asking lawmakers and a number of senators, Tyler, over the past couple of evenings, how about a guarantee for an up or down vote? Not going to guarantee that this passes, but we'll get a bill on the floor. Would you offer that, and would you accept it?
We would probably offer that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, because you're going to tell us, again, there's a bill in hand.
There is a bill in hand, and it's bipartisan.
How about a guarantee on an up or down?
I think they'd have to have the vote first before they on that, before they actually...
Before reopening?
I mean, I just do not... That is just the deficit of trust we have right now. I just do not see Democrats going forward with any effort to reopen the government without that. That's right now, that's what I'm hearing. Okay. That is where we are. And I think the reality is, like, they see some of the polling. Right? The poll today from the Washington Post said 71% of people... So there's a 17-point advantage for Democrats on this issue right now, and who's to blame for the shutdown? That's only putting more wind in their sails that they're doing the right thing.
So in our districts, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is the men and women of Main Street are being supported by the government shutdown. They do think it's a far-left move that is crippling the minority leader in the Senate. So that polling is not bearing in our districts, which are the swing districts in the country, which we need them to vote for our members come next year to keep control of the House.
Well, Sarah, I'd love your view also on this threat of permanent firings that we're seeing potentially come out of the OMB. We know President Trump said he had this meeting today with Russ Vought. Could this, though, potentially backfire on Republicans if it moves Democrats closer to their base amid concerns? Or is this really a negotiating tactic that could give them more leverage?
It's a negotiating tactic. I mean, the Democrats, when they shut the government down, knew that the director of OMB and the president would have the complete control. Sure. They're playing politics there. President Trump loves to do this. He's a businessman. So they're playing to see if they get the Democrats. They have.
Pretty authentic.
But they're trying to get the Democrats to the table to get the government reopened. And as I said, I think we have this week to do it. If not, I think it may fall to after the November elections of this year with the Virginia and the New Jersey governor races and totally in
But
play.
see, this is the part of the problem is that you had the Republicans lead, let's just do a clean CR. We just want to keep the government open. Let's just do that. And then you have Trump and Russ Vought talking about how, no, we're going to shut down Democrat agencies. We're going to do the cuts we always wanted to do. I mean, a lot of this was outlined in Project 2025 to begin with. And Russ Vought was the architect of that plan all along. So that, again, this speaks to why the well is so poisoned. We don't have any trust on the Democratic side that the president and his administration and his allies in Congress are going to actually follow through and keep their word.
But I would argue the Democrats gave that to us when they shut the government down. It was a gift
But
to
you
the
need 60
Republicans.
votes to get anything done. So you
You've
need
already
Democrats
got some
on the board.
Democrats starting to crack. We'll see if there's a couple more. Georgia, he's going to be up for re-election. So we'll see. Can they get a few more of the Democrats to come over?
You dislodge 4 or 5 next week. We could end this whole story
could.
right now.
You
Is that in the crystal ball?
That is not yet. Not yet.
All right. Who said Project 2025 here?
Yeah.
Donald Trump on Truth Social. I have a meeting today with Russ Vought. He of Project 2025 fame. I was redirected and thrown back and clapped back many times when I brought up Project 25 with Republicans during the campaign. The president said he'd never even read it.
Yeah.
What does this tell us?
I mean, I'm old enough. I think it was on this show where we talked about, when Trump was saying, prior to 2025, Russ Vought, never heard of him. He died in a ditch like 6 months ago. The reality is, of course, this has been part of the plan. It wasn't part of his plan when it became terribly unpopular. The problem is, it's still unpopular. His policies in that plan are still tremendously underwater. And that's also true with the tariffs and some of the economic policies, right? You've seen that weigh on his presidency. It's why he's only at roughly 41%. So it's an albatross around the neck of the administration. Why they're doubling down on those policies politically does not make any sense to me.
Well, Sarah, we'll take your take on this. What are you hearing from members? Is this an issue that they have to thread here, a needle to thread here when it comes to Project 2025 and the Trump administration's policies?
They don't actually talk much about Project 2025.
Smart.
Right. They are the group that live in the middle and have to get reelected. But what they have talked about, and what we talked about on the phone last couple of days, is, again, the Democrats handed this victory to President Trump. So he's allowed to do this
in the shutdown.
In the shutdown. If this would not be going on if the Democrats had not shut down the government. So it's really to blame on them.
You know what Democrats, though, every time are going to say, but Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. How is this ours?
Because they didn't have the confidence to vote for a clean CR for 7 weeks so we could get the appropriations bills done. That's really what we're trying to do, is actually go back to governing and passing appropriations bills, which would be very nice for this country.
You can say regular order out loud on this show.
Regular order.
You can do that.
That'd be great. We'd love to have regular order.
Wouldn't that be something if we came back from a CR and had 12 spending bills for the new fiscal year, or am I just, this is comedy now?
I mean, you're not Dave Chappelle, but close. Right?
Thank you.
That is. I think that's laughable. I just don't see that happening. And the well is just that poisoned.
It feels broken. Adam Hodge and Sarah Chamberlain. How about this? I told you it was a great panel. Thank you both for being with us on Balance of Power.
Make sure to check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg. We'll see you tomorrow.